Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today with a feeling that, well, I think we all know. You're scrolling through the news on your phone.
Mm.
Maybe it's about a global pandemic or an economic crisis, and you just feel sort of helpless. It's just this huge wave of information and conflicting stories.
It's that passive consumer mode. You see a headline, you feel that little spike of anxiety, and then, because what can you do? You just keep scrolling.
Exactly. And to escape that feeling, what do we usually do? We turn to entertainment. A lot of the time, video games.
Right.
We shut off the serious part of our brain, the part that's worried about all that,
Yeah.
and we just, go blast some aliens for an hour. It's
Yeah.
pure escapism.
That's the traditional way we see it, isn't it? Work and news are serious. Games are, well, they're frivolous. A distraction.
But today, we're going to dig into a research paper that suggests we might have that completely backwards. What if video games aren't the distraction from the news?
Mm-hmm.
What if building a video game is the absolute best way to actually understand it?
It definitely sounds a bit counterintuitive. I'll give you that. But the research here is, well, it's genuinely fascinating.
Since that's the source.
We're looking at a paper titled Réaliser des newsgames pour développer l'esprit critique de leurs ingénieurs, or for us, creating news games to develop the critical thinking of engineering students. It's by two researchers, Damien Jouty and Julian Alvarez.
And I want to be clear, before you think this is some dry academic paper, this was a very real, very messy experiment. We're talking about real students, real argument.
Oh, absolutely. And some results that I think surprised everyone involved. This all took place in France at the University of Toulouse in Inissa between 2010 and 2012.
Okay.
And they took about 80 engineering students and basically threw them into the deep end of media production.
We should probably talk about who these students were, because when I hear
Yeah.
making video games, I'm picturing, computer science majors.
And that's the interesting part. They weren't game design students at all. It was a real mixed bag. Civil engineers, meteorologists, general science students.
So not a room full of coders.
Not at all. I mean, some knew little Java or C++C, sure. But a huge chunk of them had zero programming experience. They were there to learn critical thinking, not how to code a video game.
So the mission wasn't to create the next big indie hit.
No.
It was to see if the process of making a game would actually force them to think differently about the world around them.
Precisely. The whole experiment was to see if making what they call news games could boost media literacy.
Okay, news game. That's a term we should probably define. I've heard of serious games, but how is this different?
It's sort of a family tree. Serious games is the big umbrella term. That's any game where the main goal isn't just fun.
Like for education or corporate training?
Exactly. A flight simulator, a typing tutor. Those are serious games. But a news game, and they're using a definition from a researcher named Sickart here, is more specific.
How so?
It's a game that participates in the public debate. It makes a comment on current events.
So it's kind of like a playable editorial cartoon.
That is the perfect analogy. A cartoon uses images to make a political point. A news game uses rules and systems to make a point.
But I'm seeing a problem here. You have a room of meteorologists and civil engineers. How do you get them to the making a point part if they're stuck for months just trying to make a character walk?
That was the biggest hurdle, the skill gap. If they all got bogged down in coding, the entire experiment would fail. So the professors used something they called game factories.
Game Factory.
Think of tools like RPG Maker or the Games Factory 2.
Ah, okay, I know those. It's
Yeah.
like drag and drop, right?
Exactly. Instead of writing code that says, if player hits wall, stop, you click a box that says solid object. It took the technical barrier right out of the equation.
So it shifted the challenge from how do I build this to...
To what am I actually trying to say? Correct. And to get them in that headspace, they had this very structured 5-phase course. And phase 1, well, it was basically a shock to the system.
the wake-up call.
They called it the introduction, but yeah. Most of these students didn't even know news games existed. So the professors just sat them down and had them play two very specific, very heavy games.
They were.
Darfur is Dying and September 12th.
I think I've heard September 12th. The one about the war on terror.
That's the one. It's an incredibly simple and incredibly frustrating game.
Yeah.
You're looking down on this village from above. You see terrorists walking around, but also civilians.
And you have a missile launcher.
You have a missile launcher,
you-
right. You try to hit the terrorists,
Right.
but the missile has a blast radius, so you always inevitably kill civilians.
Oh.
And here's the core rule. When the other civilians mourn their dead, they turn into terrorists.
So the more you shoot.
The more enemies you create. You can't win. The only way to win is to not play, to not shoot.
For an engineering student who's used to problems having clean solutions, that must have been jarring.
It completely changed their perspective. They stopped being gamers trying to get a high score and started being critics. They immediately started asking, who made this? Why these rules? What's the argument here?
So they saw that the game's rules were actually an argument about how the world works.
Yes. And once they got that, they were ready. They did their research, learned a design method, and split into small groups.
And then at the end, phase 5, the presentation.
The showdown, as the paper calls it. And it wasn't just for the professor. They had to bring in an external student, someone totally new to the project.
Oh, wow.
And have them play the game live on a big screen in front of the whole class.
That sounds absolutely terrifying. Watching someone misunderstand your political message in real time.
It creates instant debate. And that's where we get to the really powerful case studies. The first one was from 2010, centered on the H1N1 pandemic. You know, the swine flu.
A topic that probably hits a little differently now than it did back then.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But what's so incredible is you had 2 different student groups choose the exact same topic. Same news reports, same data from the WHO, same set of facts.
And they came up with different games.
Completely different games. Which is fascinating because we think of engineering as objective, right? 2 engineers with the same data should build the same bridge. But news isn't a bridge.
Okay, so let's hear about Game A.
Game A was called Superflu.
Catchy.
And their core premise was that the only way to beat a pandemic is through global cooperation. It was a networked multiplayer game where each player managed a region of the world.
So, standard strategy game stuff.
At first. But here was the rule they coded in. To win, the virus had to be gone from the entire world, not just your little corner of it.
So if I'm playing as, say, North America, and I've cured all my cities, but my neighbor is still struggling, I still lose.
You can't win. The game mechanics actually forced you to send your vaccines to other players. If you tried to hoard them, the virus would just mutate over there and come right back to you. Game over for everyone.
So they literally programmed solidarity as the only win condition. Selfishness was a losing strategy.
That's it exactly. Now, hold that thought and let's look at the second group. Same topic, H1N1. They made a game called FluCorp Inc.
FluCorp Inc. Sounds less cooperative. More like a business sim.
You nailed it. In this game, you're not a world leader. You're the CEO of a pharmaceutical company.
Okay, I think I know where this is going.
It's brutal. The game gives you a choice. Option 1. You can pour tons of money into R&D, create a perfect cure, and end the pandemic in a few turns.
Great for humanity.
Terrible for your stock price. You spend all your cash and your market just disappears. You get a game over for being a bad CEO.
Wait, so doing the right thing makes you lose the game?
In the world of FluCorp Inc., yes. The winning strategy, option B, is to invest just enough to make a so-so vaccine. One that helps, but doesn't cure.
So you keep the crisis going.
You keep it simmering, people keep getting sick, governments keep buying your product, and your stock price goes through the roof.
That is deeply cynical.
It's a quasi-militant critique, as the authors put it. The students were using something called procedural rhetoric. They didn't write an essay saying big pharma is greedy. They built a system where being greedy was the only rational move.
This idea of procedural rhetoric feels key here. The argument isn't in the text on the screen, it's in the rules you have to follow.
Exactly. In a book, you can write, greed is good. In a game, you just make a system that rewards the player for acting greedy. It's much more powerful.
So, what happened when these 2 games were presented? One says cooperation is survival, the other says the system profits from suffering.
The classroom just erupted. And this is the core finding for the researchers. They weren't arguing about graphics or bugs. They were having a full-blown debate about the ethics of the pharmaceutical industry and global politics.
Because the games made these abstract ideas tangible. You had to play by their logic.
Precisely. It showed that the news is never just neutral facts. The facts were the same for both groups. But the system you build around those facts, that creates a completely different reality.
It's all about framing. Frame the flu as a humanitarian crisis. You get superflu. Frame it as a market opportunity.
You get FluCorp Inc. And realizing that difference is critical thinking. But the experiment went even deeper. It got into the ethics of the media itself with the second case study.
This would be the Haiti incident.
Yes, this was in 2010, right after that devastating earthquake. A group of students made a game called Escape from Port-au-Prince. The goal was just to survive in the aftermath.
I can imagine that being a tricky subject.
It did not go over well. When they showed this game, the reaction wasn't just a debate about mechanics. Some of the other students were genuinely angry, indignant even.
What was their argument?
They felt it was trivializing a real tragedy. One student basically said, look, in Call of Duty, we know it's fake, but the suffering in Haiti is real. People are dying right now. To turn that into a game with a score is just, it's disrespectful.
It's that feeling that games are supposed to be fun, and putting real-world tragedy inside that magic circle of play just feels wrong.
Right. But then, and this is the amazing part, other students jumped in to defend the game's creators. They said, hold on. You can make a documentary about Haiti. You can write a book about it. Why is a video game somehow less respectful than a film?
That is a very difficult question.
They didn't solve it, of course not. But for 30 minutes, they had this spontaneous, high-level debate about the ethics of simulation and representation. It wasn't on the syllabus. It happened.
It reminds me of the first game you mentioned, Darfur is Dying.
Yes, and the researchers make that exact connection. In a game like that, you play as a refugee child trying to get water. If you're caught by the militia, the game doesn't just say, try again. It tells you, bluntly, what happens to that child.
It forces you into the victim's perspective.
It creates this profound sense of unease. And that's what those students were wrestling with. Does gamifying tragedy create empathy, or does it just turn real pain into another challenge for me, the player, to overcome?
And the fact that these are engineering students having this debate is just, it's kind of the whole point.
It is. Which leads us to the author's big conclusions. They identified 3 main outcomes from this whole experiment.
Okay, let's break them down. What's number 1?
First is the motivation to research.
That makes perfect sense. You can't simulate a system you don't understand.
Exactly. To build FluCorp, you can't just make things up. You have to research R&D costs, patent law, profit margins. You have to go from passively reading the news to actively investigating it just to make your game work.
You're reverse engineering reality.
Great way to put it. The second outcome they found was exchanging viewpoints. We saw that with the 2 flu games.
Right.
Seeing another group take the same facts and build a completely different truth forces you to accept that your own perspective isn't the only one. It's not objective.
And that destroys the comfort of a single right answer, which, for engineers, must be a really valuable lesson.
For anyone, really. And the third outcome was simply media literacy. The Haiti debate taught them to question the tool itself, not just the news, but how it's delivered.
It all feels so much more real than just writing an essay that only your professor is ever going to read.
The authors call it a complete loop of critical thinking. You have to research a topic, form a coherent point of view, build it into a system, and then defend that system in public.
It makes you wonder where else this could be applied, not just in university, but maybe in high school history classes. Journalism school.
They ask that very question. Imagine a history class where instead of just memorizing the causes of World War I, you had to design a game that modeled the alliances and triggers that led to the conflict. You'd understand the why so much more deeply.
It shifts the focus from what happened to how did this system work.
And in the world we live in, how does the system work is probably the most important question there is.
So what's the big takeaway for you, the listener? We've talked a lot about students in France, but this applies to all of us.
It really does. We all think we have a decent handle on the news. We read the headlines. We have our opinions.
But here's the challenge, the thought I want to leave you with. Pick a big headline you read this morning. Something complex inflation, a trade dispute, anything.
No, just for a second, try to imagine designing a game about it. What are the rules? Who are the players? What does it take for each of them to win?
And if you try that little mental exercise, you might just find, like those students did, that there are gaps in your understanding. You might realize you know what is happening, but you don't really know how the game is played.
And maybe if we all thought a bit more like game designers, we'd all be a little better at seeing through the easy answers.
A fascinating thought. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you on the next one.